Hello everyone, so this is Teacher Dre, and for today's video, I will be sharing with you how to use some of the basic functions in Excel. Okay, so the first one that we will be discussing is the average. Okay, so if you want to use the average function, we usually use that to get the sum of all the records and then dividing it by the total number of records. Alright, so for example, if we do it manually, if we have this example, so we have the list of product and the quantity being sold every day with the unit price on a daily basis. Then we use or we add up everything, the 10 records, and then dividing it by 10 because we want to get the average. But to simplify that, we use the average function. We just simply type in equal sign, open parentheses, and then we select the range of cells that we would like to include in the average function, and then we have $92. Okay, so if we would like to get the average quantity sold per day, we simply type in again average and then open parentheses and the quantity columns, and then we have 4.6. So it only means that on a daily basis, product AA is being sold at 4.6 pieces per day. So it's as simple as that. Okay, and for the sales, that's 92. Okay, so the next thing that we would like to talk about or learn from is the sum. Okay, sum is quite simple because it will only add up everything that we would want to include in the formula. So for example, for this one, if you want to take the total amount of sales for the entire 10 days, then we would just simply type in equal sign, the sum, open parentheses, and the range of cells that we would want to get the sum of. Okay, so in total that's around 1,360. Okay, and if you want to get the sum of all the quantity sold for that specific range of date, then that's a total of 46 items. Right, so that's the simple sum. And then the next question is, what if we would only want to get the sum or the total sales for a specific product code? For example, as you can see here, so we have 3 different product codes. We have the AA, BB, and the CC. If you want to get just the sum of or the total sales for product code BB, okay, so let's type in BB, then we can use the SumIf function. Okay, so for the SumIf function, so just simply type equal sign and the SumIf, and then we get the range. So we want to get the total sales for that specific product code, so that would be the range, and then comma, we have to start with the range of criteria. So we want the product code equal to BB, and then the sum range, so we would put it here under the total sales, and then there, so you have it there. So for BB, let's try it manually. So BB, so that's a total of $420 sum, so 420. How about for CC? So if you want to get the total sales for product code CC, then we can use the SumIf function, and then the product code, and then the specific product code that we would want to get, and then the sum range. So that's a total of $600. So let's see, let's check. There. So right below or lower right portion of the Excel, you have this actually shortcut that you can see the sum, the count, and the average for a specific selected cells. So that's the sum, 600, and that's equal to 600. So our formula is correct. So again, that's the SumIf. Now, what if I would like to get the total sales for product code AA with a quantity more than, say, 3? Okay, so as you can see, it's quite easier if we filter this out. Okay, so if you want to filter it, let's just check for the AA. So for this one, we have 4 records for a product code AA. And if you want to get the sum of the sales, total sales for product AA with quantity sold above 3, for example. So we have 2 that is below 3. So we should be getting just around $260, right? Because we only want the ones with a criteria higher than 3. Okay, so for example, AA and the quantity is above 3. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, so let me remove the filter to show every record there is. So we use the SumIfs. Okay, so that's the difference. We just added an S for the SumIfs, just for us to provide more than one criteria for this specific case. Okay, so it says there sum range. So we just highlight the total sales because that's what we want. And then the criteria, range 1. So we want to get the product code AA. And then for the quantity, we would want to get those that are above 3, close parenthesis. So you see, that's the SumIfs, the range, sum range, and then our first criteria is AA, so that's separated by a comma, and then the second criteria is for the quantity, and that's above 3. Okay, note that it's enclosed with an open and closed parenthesis. Okay, so let's see. So the answer is 260. Okay, so we got the correct one, right? Okay, so for more than one criteria, and to get the sum of more than one criteria, we use SumIfs. And if the criteria is just one, we use SumIf. And then just to get the sum of all the cells that we would want to include in, then we just simply use the sum. Alright, so what if we want to get the product code CC and the say quantity is less than 5? Okay, so let's see. So to have a better view of product CC, so we have there, so what we're looking at is the quantity less than 5, so we only have one record, so the answer here should be just $120, right? Okay, so let's see. So we type in there SumIfs, and then the sum range, and the product code is CC, and the quantity is less than 5, close parenthesis. Okay, so we got the right one, so that's $120. Okay, so that's for our sum. So as you can see, we covered actually 3 functions under the sum function. So the next one is, or the next function is the count function. So this is very useful, especially if we are counting the number of records for a specific condition. Like for example, for this one, so the function counts the number of cells that has a number in it. So for example, we want to count the total records for this particular example. So that's a total of 10. Okay, so if we drag the formula towards the left, so as you can see, as long as there is number or there are dates in it, the count function can count the record. Okay, so but for the product code, since there's no number, it's not a number, it's technically a string or a letter, then it counted 0. So what about for cases like that we want to count all the cells with a record in it? So we usually use the count A. So it simply counts the rows or the cells that has value in it. So for example, for this one, so it counted 10, and expectedly it should also count the product code because it's not blank, right? But for example, we remove some of the data in there. So as you can see, we removed 2 cell values, so the answer is 8. So it counted 8, right? So what if we count, we also have a function that counts the blank cells, so that's the count blank. So for example, we want to count how many blank records are under the product code column, so it will return 2 because there are 2 blanks in this specific column. Okay, so that's quite useful, especially if you're counting the number of or a huge volume of records and it's kind of hard to count it manually. So you can use the count function. Alright, so let's bring back the records there. So what if you would want to count the total number of records under a specific product code? For example, you want to count the records only under the product code AA. So the way to do that is to type in CountIf. So it's like the SumIf, right? But it's almost similar. So CountIf and then the range. And then the criteria. Okay, so as you can see, there are 4 records consisting of product code AA. So the formula was able to get that. How about for CC? So as you can see, there are 3 records under CC. So CountIf range and then CC. So there. And just like the SumIf, if you have if you want to count records for more than one condition, with more than one condition, we can use the CountIfs. CountIfs. Okay, so criteria range. So say we want to count, oh wait, hold on. Say we want to count all the records with AA and quantity more than 3. Okay, so we use SumIfs, CountIfs, and then open parentheses, and we have the criteria range 1. So we want to count the AAs, and then criteria range 2. So we want to count those that are below 3. We actually have that record. Oh, actually we have 2. So this one, this is the first one, and then on the second one. Okay, so we have 2, right? And if we count those that are above 5 and under AA, so as you can see, we only have 1 record. No, we should only have 1 record. So it's, if it's above 5, that's 1. Okay, so that's how you get the count given a specific condition or conditions. So it depends. If the condition is just 1, we use the CountIf, and if you have multiple conditions, you can use the CountIfs. Okay, so there. Now the next function that we will be discussing is the if function. Okay, so for the if function, for instance, we would want to get the actual product name. For this specific example, say for example AA, BB, and CC, these are product codes. Okay, so for example, AA are actually apples, BB are bananas, and then C are oranges. So if we want to get the product name for a specific product code, we can actually use the if function. So if the cell that we would want to check, and then if that cell is AA, then it's an apple. Otherwise, it's false. Oh, sorry. Oh, we have to have. Okay, if B3 is equal to AA, then that's apple. Otherwise, it's false. Okay? So just drag it downwards, and as you can see, the problem with this formula is it cannot, it only detects those with product code AA. But for BB and CC, it is returning false because it's not included in the formula. Okay, so for that specific example, we can actually use the ifs function. Okay, so for the ifs function, oh, let me use it here. For the ifs function, you simply get the first logical test. If B3 is equal to AA, then these are apples. If B3 is equal to BB, then these are bananas. Then the next logical test is if B3 is equal to CC, then these are oranges. Okay, so all the logical tests are separated with a comma, and make sure that it's also enclosed with an open and closed parenthesis. So there you have it. So if it's AA, it's apple, banana for BB, and then oranges for CC. So there. So if you have multiple conditions or multiple logical tests that you want to perform in a specific record, then it's very useful if you use the ifs function. So that's quite very useful for me personally, because I have a lot of data that has multiple conditions in it. So yeah. Okay, so that's the if, and then the next function that we will be discussing is the concatenate. So as defined, we usually use the concatenate if you want to combine two records into one. So for example, in this specific example, so we have a list of maybe employees or students, and then we have the first name, last name, and the middle initial separated with different columns. And if you want to create a column with, say, a full name in it, and then we want to combine or concatenate all the columns into one, then we use the concatenate. So how do we use it? Just type in concatenate in the first record, and then separated by the comma, and then the second record, and then the third record. Okay, now if we do that, as you can see, it simply combined everything without spaces. So what we want to do is to separate each columns with space. Okay, so to do that, we add in the open and close parenthesis with a space in it. Okay, and then there. John Perez I. Okay, and we want to drag that down. Okay, so you have the full name. And also, it's also useful if you format it in a different way. For example, you want to concatenate the records starting with the last name and then separated by a comma, and then the first name, and then separated by a space, and then the middle initial. So you have there our most common format for names, right? Family name, comma, first name, and the middle initial. Now there's also a shortcut if it's easier for you to use the ampersand in concatenating data. So for example, for this one, I simply type in equal sign and then the ampersand, and then I'll concatenate that with a comma, and then another ampersand, and then the first name, and then another ampersand, and then my space, and then another ampersand, and the middle initial. So it will give you the same result. Okay, so either you use the function concatenate or the ampersand, so it will give you the same results. Okay, so that's our concatenate. Okay, so last but not the least, I hope you are learning so far, and if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. So I'm very new here, and it will really help if you could share my videos. Okay, so for the last one, we will be discussing the VLOOKUP function. Okay, so for the VLOOKUP function, it's very useful, especially for multiple records that you would want to summarize in. For example, for this specific data. For example, these are the data of your employees. Okay, so we have the ID number, the first name, last name, middle name, and then the email, contact, and the address. For example, there are a lot of records in it, and what you have are just the ID numbers. So what you can do is to create a VLOOKUP function to extract the records from it. Okay, so for example, you have the ID, you have the first name, you have the last name, and then the middle initial, then the email, and then the contact, and the address. Okay. Okay, so for example, you have the ID number 1. Okay, so what you want is to automatically populate these fields automatically if you entered the ID number. Okay, so we want to look for the first name in this example by entering the ID number. Okay, so to do that, we use the VLOOKUP function, and then we would want to look for the ID number. So let's type in the cell number, and then we will be looking that ID number in a table array. Okay, so we need to choose the entire table that our data will come from, and then separated by comma, we need to put in the column index number. So for example, we want the first name, so to identify the column index number starting from the left one, so this is the first index number, so index number 1 and index number 2. So index number 2 is what we are after, since it's the first name. And then true or false to exact match or approximate match. So let's get the exact match. So there you have John, right? So ID number 1, and then we have John. And then for the second one, so that's the last name. So let's just repeat our formula. Okay, so we want to look for the ID number from this table array, but this time our column index is 3. Perez. Okay, and then we can just copy and then paste the formula, and then change the index to 4 to get the to get the middle initial, and then 5 for the email address, and then 6 for the contact number, and then 7 for the address. So there you have it. So that's our VLOOKUP. Okay, so if you type in, all you need to do is to change the ID number. So for example, you want to check whose ID number is number 4. So you have Joshua Galvez. Okay, so for 5, how about 6? So that's NE, because we don't have any record for 6 unless we change this to 6. So there you have it, our VLOOKUP. Okay, so this is also useful if you have sensitive information such as this one, because email, contact number, name, these are sensitive information. So you can actually use the VLOOKUP table from a different sheet or from a different workbook, for example, for this one. So this is a different sheet, and then I only applied the same formula, the VLOOKUP, and then it's looking from a different worksheet, right? So for example, if I type in 1, so it still gets the information from the VLOOKUP worksheet there. So John Perez. So if you type in 3, then that's still Matthew. Right, so that's our VLOOKUP. Okay, so of course I wasn't able to format everything nicely as for the moment, but for my next videos I will be teaching you how to format your Excel file in a nicer way. So that's our lesson for today. So I hope you like and subscribe my channel. So it's very new, and I hope I was able to share with you the basics of these top widely used functions. Thank you so much, guys, and see you on my next video.